Hello, everyone. Today I am delighted to be joined in the Boogie Board Tiki Bar by Ashley Wilson. She is the co-founder and COO of Momentum. She and I met at an event here in Austin, Texas, and I have been a huge fan of the company ever since. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
How is winter in Argentina?
Well, it's summer in Argentina,
Oh
winter
my
months,
goodness.
but I'm still getting used to it, honestly, because it's like December 19th. It should be cold and cozy and Christmassy, and it's 90 degrees. So,
That's an incredible start to the podcast. I'm going to have to leave that in
yeah.
there, unfortunately, because that makes me seem incredibly stupid, but it is funny.
It's okay. It happens. It's hard to imagine that is totally the opposite.
Do you find any challenge with that, or you embrace you're in summer mode?
I think I'm trying to figure out how to do like Christmas traditions with my kids in the way that I loved Christmas with Christmas music and stockings and a real tree. And here it's all about, I mean, kids are in summer break. They're in summer camp. There is no Christmas music going on. So I'm like trying to do like what we do is, and also they open presents at midnight on Christmas Eve. So everything's off for me. So I'm trying to still figure out what are we doing that's a little bit American, a little bit Argentinian.
Fair enough. Well, good luck to you. Yeah, I feel that same thing a little bit with my kids because I live here in Texas, but not to that
Yeah.
extent. I just want to go back to young Ashley. When Ashley was a kid, I imagine that you did not know that you wanted to start an AI company down the road yet. So what did young Ashley want to be when she grew up?
Yeah, I will say I did not know that existed. Did not imagine that could even be a possibility. Yeah, I mean, when I was 8 years old, I wanted to be either a writer or an actress. So my world from about age, I would say 4 or 5 to kind of 18 was in the arts, performing arts. And so singing, dancing, creative writing. I went to performing arts high school. I danced 5 days a week. I was just super, super obsessed with it. So I imagined I thought I would maybe move to New York City at some point and be an actress or be a writer. Very
And you,
far removed from what I do today.
maybe we're on camera right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was going to dive in because you did have a writing career. I was doing some
Yeah.
research, and you went to Indiana University, and it looked like you were pretty involved with the student paper there.
Yeah, yeah, I did. And I did revive my singing career later on. We could talk about that too. So I found ways to kind of weave it back in, but my day to day right now is not doing that.
What did you do at the student paper? Was that your introduction to writing more formally in a published sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I decided to go to IU and do journalism, partly out of excitement, partly out of fear, like being a creative writer. I think I always had a practical side of like, how am I going to make money off of this? And same with being an artist and being a dancer. Like, how do I make a living? So journalism and going to school for that seemed like a way to make a career that would still pay me, not well, but at least would pay something. My mom is a journalist, so I kind of knew a little bit of that world. She's a news anchor on TV, so different. And yeah, it was a great. I think anyone who is excited about current events, writing, journalism is just such an awesome degree, even if you don't use it.
And so you go and you're in the student paper, you're doing journalism. How do you eventually get into marketing? How do you get your foot in the door, start in the professional world? What's the story there?
Yeah, so I moved to San Francisco kind of sight unseen about 9 months after graduating from IU. I went on vacation with my family and I said, oh my God, what is this city? I'm from Atlanta originally. So I just was used to like cars, 1 hour commutes. If you walk on a sidewalk, people look at you funny because it's not a city made for walking. And then I get to San Francisco and I'm like, what? This is incredible. This exists. And I literally told my dad at the time, we got off the plane. I'm like, I'm moving here. And so I moved a week later. I went home. I started applying for jobs. I got a job interview, moved into a place with roommates. And I was looking to do marketing for the San Francisco Ballet. That's kind of what my dream was. I figured, okay, I can do marketing. That's kind of like writing, but I can do it in the arts. And so that was kind of my plan. And I actually got an interview at the San Francisco Ballet for kind of an entry level marketing position. And I didn't get that job. And the week that I didn't get that job, I got a job at a startup randomly called Sauce Labs. And so that took me down this whole other path that has 15 years later turned into my life as it is today.
It's the way it goes sometimes. Now, I'm looking at kind of your trajectory at that initial company, and it looks like you start in entry level marketing, but pretty quickly you start taking on some additional roles. It looks like you actually were heading up some sales for them as well. Was that an unexpected challenge? I would imagine some of sales would surprise you, having planned to be kind of doing this journalism, writing focused marketing with an arts bend. You're now selling in the technology world.
Yeah, it was super scary. I kind of got thrown in the deep end, as you do in a startup. I mean, I think startups are the best opportunity to grow really fast and come in pretty much a blank slate early in your career, because that's where you go and figure out what pathways you could go down. I was the first non-technical hire. We were about 10 people at the time and basically $0 in revenue. I think we had 3 customers. And so I started out doing kind of office manager events. I saw that nobody was managing the blog. So I'm like, can I do the blog? And then I got kind of tapped in to start doing like SDR work. And then suddenly for like 9 months, I kind of was the salesperson. And yeah, I think it was I ultimately decided to go back to marketing because I think both experience, imposter syndrome, personality wise, it felt very scary to do sales. And it just felt almost, I don't want to say insurmountable, but I felt like, oh gosh, you get to enjoy, if you hit your number at the end of the quarter, you get the one day of joy and then it all starts over again. This is such an emotional roller coaster that at 23, living in San Francisco, I'd moved there 5 months, it's just like, it's a lot. I just felt kind of like a fish out of water. So I dug my heels into marketing, which felt a little safer, even though still scary. And but I'm really grateful for that experience of having to like talk to customers and bring that empathy into marketing. And also that ties in with I did a lot of our community management and events and stuff. So learning the product as a salesperson, I think you makes you, of course, a better marketer, makes you better at anything you're doing in a company.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And during this time, you're starting in your career, but you're doing a couple different things. You're organizing meetups and you're running it looks like a conference as well. Was it natural for you to be doing multiple things at the same time? Like were you kind of an extracurriculars type person, pretty active?
Yeah, I think it's like obvious that I'm a overachiever or a type A. I don't know what the word is. It's a good trait and a bad trait. Yeah, I mean, I just like to do a lot of different things all at once, and a lot of those things, the community management, the conferences were through work, so it was all part of kind of my job at the company. So it kind of felt natural to just, like I said, you're young, you're trying to grow. I'm sure you've experienced this. Like you're just trying to make your mark, I think. And if you're curious and want to know what else is out there, I certainly didn't think I'd be doing that I mean, SAS Labs with Selenium testing in the cloud. So like QA folks, browser testing. It's not something you can explain easily to your parents. So the fact that I was able to like find interest and enjoyment kind of showed me like, oh, I can get excited about anything as long as it's kind of, I'm not bored, I'm connecting with people, I'm organizing things. So it's pretty natural for me to kind of just take on a lot.
No, I think that's usually indicative of a kind of a positive attitude is when folks are willing to create community in a space that, for all intents and purposes, you might not have had a particular interest in beforehand. So kudos to you for doing that. I'm sure it was fruitful.
It was fun.
You then go on to lead marketing at Sauce Labs. And so you're still really young at this time. What's your introduction to leadership like?
Yeah, like again, getting pushed off the deep end. I mean, I was 25, the only woman on the leadership team, and really one of, we started hiring more women as we got going as a company. But I think we were a very engineering heavy company. We're selling to engineers, like very male dominated experience. I was super fortunate that our CEO, John Dunham, was his biggest strength and his biggest focus was on team building and culture and giving people opportunity. So he saw something in me that he was like, you can do this. He gave me a mentor, this wonderful kind of CMO consultant, Geva Perry. And so I had a lot of good mentorship. And then I, of course, made a lot of mistakes and figured things out and like learned as I went. And, some things worked, some things didn't. And I did ultimately end up running a team of, I think I had like 6 people. And, I left when we were about 10, a little bit under 10 million in revenue. So it was a great kind of training ground for me, but super scary too, going to board meetings in my situation as a 25-year-old, coming from Georgia in the art world. But yeah, I feel like all of it's kind of given me good armor now. Like I'm so much more confident now, probably because of those experiences early on.
Yeah, and it must have clicked a little bit. Like they're not putting you in that situation unless you're doing a good job. Are you building confidence? Is it related to marketing? Is it related to startups, business in general? Like what are you starting to feel that's clicking for you at that time?
I think definitely marketing. Like I bringing on other, like I brought on someone to run demand gen. I brought on someone to run content. So getting to learn from other people who candidly were further along in their career than I was great. And to kind of collaborate with them. And then I think one of the biggest takeaways I had from that experience was John said something to me early on that really stuck with me. Of he said many things. He was a great mentor, but he said, you know, you are going to be probably making more money than your parents ever did. So you should figure out like your relationship to money. I expressed a lot of things about how am I going to like balance future motherhood with like this path, like just being mindful of like, okay, I do want to have a family one day. Like, you know, and my mom was a working mom. So I was kind of trying to figure out like, how do I want to do things different? And just really good mentorship around thinking through those things and not holding myself back unnecessarily by limiting beliefs or my past. I really feel like I got those 5 years were about, of course, learning about startups. And it was really fun to kind of ride that like next wave of startup growth in 2010s in San Francisco, but also personal growth of figuring out like the future life I want to have. I think it's set me up for the life I have today, which like I have 3 kids. I run a startup, like all the things that I thought, like, how am I going to do that? I'm like, I'm doing it and I'm happy. So I think I worked through a lot of things those years to enable myself to be here.
Yeah, and intention about the things outside of the startup world are always hard when you're in it, especially at that time in SF. I mean, that's the rocket ship emoji, right? It's
Yeah.
distracting in many ways. And so after a great run, you then decide to head out. And I see a few things here that you kind of overlap. You're doing, it appears, some consulting, interim head of marketing work. You then go on to start your own marketing agency. Can you just kind of tell me the story of that portion of your career where you're taking on a lot of work, probably experimenting with a few different companies? What did that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, the catalyst for leaving Sauce was I felt like the time had kind of come. I think you sort of know in a startup when it's just like, okay, I'm good. Like we were 80-ish people. Like it just felt like I'd done the early stage. It was super fun. Company was changing. You know, I think it was time to bring in somebody else. And it kind of paired with this voice. I do remember distinctly, I think it was earlier in that year of 2014, I had this crazy voice be like, I want to sing. Like, what would be my dream right now? I would love to sing in front of my coworkers. I would love to sing in a bar. And it came out of nowhere because I was like, I was 28 at the time. So I hadn't been singing since I was 18. So 10 years, I'm living like a totally different life. So I kind of started to just follow that thread. I did this very transformational book called The Artist's Way, which I highly recommend to anyone who wants to explore their creative self. And I don't think it has to just be art creativity. I think we're all innately creative. We're all able to get in that flow state. And that book really helps kind of excavate who you are at that 8-year-old mark and you're
Hmm.
dreaming about your future. So I did that and it just kind of showed me like, wow, there's something here to go do. So I started marketing consulting so I could pay my bills, but I also started taking piano lessons. I started taking singing lessons. And I started saying like, maybe I'll be a singer. And that's what I kind of did for those couple years. And actually starting Olivine came out of, I don't want to be an individual consultant who's getting called as Ashley Wilson. I want to have this entity that I create that I'm part of, but that's bigger than me so that I can also be a singer. And nobody has to know when I'm like doing my jazz gigs or in the studio because Olivine can exist as Olivine and I can be Ashley, either the marketing consultant or the artist.
Absolutely. Okay, so you kind of casually just set up a a marketing company, and it sounds like you get some clients on board, and you're doing that work to pay the bills. Challenging to set that up, get the first few clients on board, or do you feel like it was a pretty seamless transition?
I don't think anything is seamless. I think what happened for me is that I left Sauce and I got asked to do some early stage consulting with companies kind of in our space. I'd kind of carved out a bit of a niche for myself doing developer focused marketing for like testing companies. So the 4 or 5 companies that were in that space were like, hey, come work with us. So I had business and my insight at the time was that I kept getting asked to do the same things. Positioning and messaging, case studies, change our landing page, personas, build this deck. And from my time at Sauce, like one of my favorite things in marketing was product marketing. So it was more out of just saying, hey, I keep getting asked to do these things. I could probably make more money as an agency because I could charge flat fee. I could subcontract people. I could have this entity so I can do my singing. And I noticed that, like, there was not a product marketing agency at the time. There was content marketing, there was demand gen. And so I kind of jumped on that bandwagon, luckily. And I will say we're still, that was in 2015. I incorporated in 2016, January. We're still the number one search on Google when you search for product marketing agency. And so even by doing no SEO, I can't take credit for like knowing anything about I'm not very good at SEO. I was able to kind of jump on that bandwagon early and sort of say like, okay, there's something here within product marketing that companies are going to need services around.
Do you think that your singing and the music work that you were doing made it easier to just be tactical about setting up the consultancy?
Yeah, that's a great insight. I think that I had kind of two things happening at that time. One was I would be in this very vulnerable singing state because I was starting to gig at like clubs, and sometimes you're singing to like two people, which is very nerve-wracking to perform. And then you're singing for an audience of no one. So I would do that at night and then go back to my marketing consulting by day and feel like, oh, thank God, this is like so much easier. And it was almost like this, I could almost put this cloak back on and like feel, okay, I had this like highly vulnerable experience. And then I go back to the very safe, like side of myself. And I remember feeling that. And then over time, that started to feel like they were at tension with each other. Cause I was like, man, my marketing people don't know I sing. It wasn't a secret, but it just were two different worlds. And like my musician friends in my band, like they did not know Ashley as the marketer at all or the tech person. Like, and so I started to kind of like over the time be like, what is just me? Like, and I think it also came from being in tech, feeling like you have to, San Francisco especially. It's like when I was in tech, like I didn't know any non-tech people. It just, you're in a bubble. When I got into music, I started to meet all these other types of people that were still in the same city that I was in. It's just my experience. So I think in tech, sometimes it can feel like you're keeping up with this very prescriptive type of role, person, persona. And I started to see like, oh, that is not real. That doesn't have to be reality.
Oh, I love that. That's really beautiful. So often we read business books and listen to case studies and things like that. And then you do something that's outside of our world and it's so much more expansive. And your story makes me think about that. And so you mentioned you're kind of running these two Ashleys, if you will, with a goal, I would assume, of converging them at some point. Is there a moment where it kind of converges and you stop delineating the two?
Yeah, I think I ended up taking my singing to the place where I ended up writing an album. So I got really into songwriting. I mean, it just goes to show, like I kind of go all in on things, as you can tell. So I discovered songwriting and I ended up making an album and launched it on Spotify and I launched it. So it kind of felt like that was the sort of defining moment where I'm saying to the world, and all of Vine too was like doing really, really well. And I brought on a kind of a co-founder, Ray Lambert, kind of to help me grow that. And so I kind of, that was a moment where I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do both of these things. Like these things are both here. I'm going to be loud and proud about them. They're just me. And one of the cool things about Olivine is that I really wanted to hire people who I didn't ever really want to have full-time employees. I just wanted to have contractors, but contractors that I worked with regularly, like for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And I kind of naturally gravitated towards people who were like me in that they had these other things that they were doing. So like our early kind of like core team where one was becoming a coach, one had a writing career, one was writing a children's book. And I loved kind of seeing this group of people come together who were doing like, we're making websites for like very techie companies and doing positioning for ServiceNow. And then on the side, we're all like doing these very creative different things. So that was kind of after a couple of years, being able to see that I wasn't alone. There were a lot of other people like me. And it was almost a way for me to kind of like be more public about it and get more people in the fold who wanted to have a career that would pay their bills and something that they were really interested in, but also would not be the only thing that they were about.
Do you still tap into that from a hiring perspective? Out of curiosity, are you asking questions about what people are up to?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't know if I'm tapping into it as explicitly because I do think it's different when you are working full time for a startup. Not different, but I think that the great thing about consulting is it's on your own time and you're making up your own schedule. I think with a startup. And this is what I felt at Sauce Labs and why I had to kind of compartmentalize and put that other side of me away, that you just have way less time to do that stuff. And I think that you want people who are curious, interesting. I love hiring parents because I think that they have to be really good with their time. And I love people who have interesting, like everyone has hobbies, but I do think at a startup, you just have to have a different level of like focus and dedication. That for those years that you're there, I'm gonna have to make that your focus of your like working hours, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly requires a bit of attention.
It just asks a lot more of you, and you got to kind of be okay with saying, okay, I'm going to do this right now.
You got to be all in. Your family's got to be all in. My friends are all in, it feels like.
Exactly. It's,
The whole world's in.
yeah. Do you find
So,
that? Like, do you
abs-
find that you have to
you know,
almost not compartmentalize, but you have to kind of turn off those other things? Or you're like, maybe I'll pick them up in the future. But
yeah, yeah. I think that's one thing that I kind of struggle with is just making sure that I'm doing the right things outside of life or outside of my working life to make sure that I'm being a good dad, being available enough to my kids. I feel like I'm in a good place with that and my wife and my family. But I had a friend move to town and he was like, "Hey, can you play pickleball? Like open ended. I could have chosen any time in the next month." And I was just like, "No, like I
no.
just can't. I'm sorry. I can
Yeah.
only do two things, which are my family and my work." And I have conflict with that sometimes.
Oh, we could talk all day about that alone. I feel like that is I mean, I'm married to my co-founder, one of my co-founders, so we equally are kind of all in on both sides, but we say a lot that it's our life is quite simple for better or worse because it's kids and work. And it's just when you sign up for kids, you're signing up to be with them. And when you're signing up for your own startup, as you know, it's like there's a little bit of commitment and blood. Like it's, you'll decouple things if you really need to, but I think you have to kind of look at it as if this is what I said I'm going to do. This is the commitment, because otherwise life has too many other things that are tempting to go down. And I think that's like the distraction is the thing that gets us tripped up and makes us feel like we should be doing something else, or we have FOMO. And
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so that brings me to momentum. And so, Olive Vine's doing well. You're singing and experimenting with other things. What makes you jump back into the ring?
yeah, so I think the pandemic honestly had a big part in this because I had my first kid, 19. So that definitely added a extra level of complexity to kind of thinking about singing and being out at night and how I would do that in the future. But I figured, okay, I've got time to think about that. And right as I was coming off maternity leave, February 2020, and thinking like, great, we're gonna like dig back into Olivine and dig into singing. And like then the pandemic hit in March, shutdown happened, and it really was as for everyone, like okay, what now? And suddenly there's no music, there's we I mean our consulting business kind of dried up really quickly. Like marketing budgets just went away so fast, and we were doing a lot of video at that time too, so like a lot of on-site videos, so that just immediately got the kibosh. At that time, Santi and Moy, their other co-founder, were exploring starting a company together. So they're doing the company. I mean, they're ideating. This was like April, May, ideating. Ray and are kind of like spinning up some side projects within marketing. We're taking care of our 9-month-old at the time. And we really liked the idea of Momentum from a problem space, which was really around kind of workflow automation, centralizing work that's happening in Slack, updating other systems from Slack. Just felt very timely and interesting and something that we could go after. And we figured that sales was the team that was kind of getting most disrupted with us being at home and doing calls on Zoom and working within Slack. So Ray and I decided to basically function almost as a part-time third co-founder. So we helped to help with marketing. So to start with like initial customer interviews, personas, messaging, positioning. And then about 6 months into that, I realized actually when Momentum was going out for its pre-seed round, I realized that like, oh, I don't really want to sit on the sidelines for this. I'm going to be so involved as a partner to Santi. And so I'm either going to do it behind the scenes or in front of the scenes. And I think I realized that, hey, this might be the chance to go jump into something different and give it a shot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the way that I heard about momentum was I was ironically actually doing one of these interviews. I was interviewing Mark Turner, who leads RevOps
Yeah,
for Demand
for
Base.
demand base.
And I was asking him about, AI and in the future of tooling. And he just kept saying, Momentum is kind of my answer to this question.
That's
And so
awesome.
that's how I heard about y'all and started checking you out. And so you've now been on the journey for 4 years. What's exciting to you at this point? Obviously, that initial stage, you want to go in, you want to be in with your partner, you want to be all in, you're excited by the idea via COVID. What are you thinking about now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we added AI into the product in October, September kind of too. So like right before ChatGPT exploded. Not knowing it would explode, we went to kind of Salesforce that year. We met some other companies that were we just saw the growth that was happening for companies that were building with AI that we said, okay, let's do something with this. And very quickly, as you see with AI, it's like so magical. You're like, okay, are we pivoting? Are we become like, and luckily we didn't pivot, but we definitely, it was the boost we needed, I think, to see the growth that ultimately led us to our Series A. And so I say that because what I'm most excited about this next year is to kind of keep seeing those two worlds come together where the AI powered kind of insights we're driving coupled with the kind of workflow automation, probably future AI agent world come together. I think we've seen our best customers are using both sides of Momentum. So we see validation there. But I think we're just scratching the surface of what is going to be possible with rep and kind of CS efficiency, and then leaders having the insights that they need with nobody doing any work. All they have to do is show up to the call. All they have to do is have the conversation. Everything else is happening on their behalf. And the insights are getting to the right people. The systems of record are getting updated. We're getting tons of requests to push data now to Snowflake so that data teams can do more with these insights. So I'm really excited about 2025 being the year that some of what we have thought is going to come to fruition is, I think, now ready to kind of be this future world that we step into.
How are you personally able to kind of keep your eyes up on the future? And this is a question about probably my own insecurities again, because I find that it's very easy in the building mode to just be so heads down. And then we have similar outside of work constraints, not constraints,
Yes.
but constraints. And so one of the other things I think about is like, how do I make sure that I am ingesting the information about all the things that are coming up, that I'm staying technologically aware? How does that hit you?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. I have to give a lot of credit to Santi and Moise because I think them being technical and engineering kind of co-founders, even though Santi is definitely wouldn't probably know he's an engineer because he's a good salesperson, that it's been helpful for them to kind of like keep a pulse on the latest and greatest changes. And then to pair that with, I think what I bring to the table is, lots of conversations with customers, kind of overseeing customer success, kind of marrying the two of like, where do they think product Santi's really about like product vision. Moise is about like what's possible. And I'm really about like what do the customers want? What could be. So I think the combination of us all having, you got to have kind of our different takes on it. Cause like if it was just me, like Momentum wouldn't exist because I'd be doing something different. And if they didn't have me, I think the Momentum would be in a different flavor. So I think we do have a combination of probably just natural skills and interests that I think help us, that I think make us poised to be able to like go after this problem space that is deeply technical at the end of the day and changing so fast. My job as a marketer is it's one of the most challenging companies I think to position for, it's not hard positioning. It's like everyone understands now what happens when you record your calls, and now note taking is totally commoditized. Like we don't have to sell the idea of AI for sales. What I find so challenging though is I have to update our positioning literally every 6 months because it's changing so fast.
Well, that makes a ton of sense. I really like your answer to the question that the team is intentionally built in a way to capture, that future state into the business. And yeah, I resonate with that positioning piece as well. I mean, it's constant and it feels like it's never perfect, but then you want to jump back into it and you're like, well, at some point I do need to let this run. I know. It's so hard. But you got to do it. All right. I've got one last question. This has been awesome. So you've now, in a short career, managed to have a singing career. You've been head of marketing. You've led sales. You've been an advisor. You've started one of your own businesses and then another. If you're looking back or advising someone on what they should do when they start jumping into their career and they say, that's awesome, I want to be like Ashley, what would you tell them to do? I love that. That's another beautiful note to end on. Ashley, thank you so much for doing this. I hope you have an incredible rest of the summer. We will link to Momentum in the notes, and I hope to see you at a conference here at some point soon. I'm sure I will. Thank you. Talk soon.